Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Maqbool, with you at PTV World. In today's show, we're going to be talking about something that has come to light yesterday in a report issued by The Guardian, but has been something that Pakistan has been reiterating for quite some time now, and that is, of course, India's intelligence operations within Pakistan. And this is something that Pakistan has been saying a number of occasions, that there have been sleeper cells of Indian intelligence agency in the UAE, from where it has been operating within Pakistan and elsewhere as well. And this is something now that has been again verified by a report issued by The Guardian that has cited both Pakistani and Indian intelligence officials, claiming that this is so, talking about how this is part of a larger series of efforts that had been started back in 2019 with regards to targeting so-called terrorist organizations and individuals, and also what India deemed as handlers of militant groups working in what they call in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And this is, of course, something of concern in terms of what Pakistan has also been experiencing and what other countries, including the US and Canada, have also recently experienced and publicly came out with as well. We've also heard with regards to this report that there is now an end to this operation for the time being, at least since after the allegations were made publicly by the US and Canada of Indian involvement in the attacks targeting Sikh separatists. And this is important, especially with regards to what exactly is the strategy and the scale of such an operation, which the Indian intelligence officials have claimed, of course, required approval from the highest office. And this, of course, points towards what we've been talking about for quite some time now, with the BJP government in power and the role of the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who's all set to be part of winning the next election as well. And of course, Modi's campaign with regards to Hindutva ideology, and then, of course, targeting Muslims, and of course, the operations in countries like Pakistan is something that we're all aware of. And we're going to be also mentioning, of course, with regards to what the statement has and come from the Indian side. Of course, the Foreign Ministry has denied the involvement and have also gone against what the Guardian reports. The Indian officials are saying that they are not involved in any such attempts of assassinations that were made against individuals within Pakistan, and that no such operation is underway of hiring people for these particular jobs, and have also claimed that this is not a policy that India follows in any other country. And so we're going to be taking a look at this in further detail as to what this means and what aspects of what is happening on ground the report actually looks into, and how exactly does this play into what Pakistan has been saying for quite some time now, and what this means then of how this is going to be dealt with both by Pakistan and by other countries in the international community. So that's going to be our focus in the discussion today. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Raja Faisal. We've also been joined in our studios by former Foreign Secretary and President of a leading institute for regional studies, Mr. Johar Salim, who's joined us in the studios. Thank you very much for joining us and being a part of the discussion. And we've also been joined online by Brigadier Retired Masood Ahmed, who's a senior analyst. Thank you very much, Masood Saab, for being part of the discussion and taking the time out today. Salim Saab, I'll start with you with reference to what has been going on. Of course, Pakistan has been talking about Indian involvement of operations within Pakistan. And now we've seen that this report citing Indian officials has talked about how this is something that was part of a larger operation that was identified and formed by India, including, of course, RAW and also the state and the Prime Minister and his cabinet. And so we want to understand, when we take a look at what has been happening on ground and what this reports really talk about, is there anything fundamental about this report that Pakistan hasn't already talked about or wasn't already aware of?
Thank you. This report, of course, has basically substantiated what Pakistan has been saying all along for many years now. If I have to go back to 2014 and before, when Ajit Doval, who became the National Security Advisor then, and who is the current National Security Advisor as well, so he claimed that India had started a new policy which he termed as offensive defense or defensive offense. So he used both the terms in different statements or interviews. The policy, as he elaborated in some of his lectures within India, was that India will make Pakistan bleed, alluding that. They will do it through terrorism, like sponsoring terrorism in Pakistan. Now, since then, we have seen very many Indian attempts, in Indian involvement in the acts of terrorism, in sponsoring the acts of terrorism in Pakistan. You would recall, the Indian naval officer who was arrested, serving Indian naval officer, and many other episodes. Now, this story, interestingly enough, this story does not only quote officials from Pakistan intelligence, or sources at least. It also quotes sources from the Indian side, former Indian intelligence officers. And what they clearly state is, what the story has very much substantiated is that after 2019, the Pulwama incident, India came up with a new doctrine of targeted killings beyond its borders. And since then, about 20 assassinations took place in Pakistan. We have seen that there were attempts in other countries as well. In Canada, for instance, the famous incident which actually ignited a big diplomatic row between the two countries. Justin Trudeau himself, the Canadian Prime Minister, he is on record claiming, accusing India of involving in targeted killings on the Canadian soil. And there was this famous case, Hardeep Singh Najjar. Then in the US, there was again a Sikh separatist, Gurpant Singh Pannu. There was an attempted assassination. It was blocked by the American authorities, but then it became again an issue between the two countries. Then the UK authorities also accused Indians of planning similar activities. So it's not just Pakistan. These are major Western countries.
Yeah.
And they would not make any accusations if they don't have any the evidence to support that. Then again, what we see, it's very interesting. Since this story appeared in the Guardian, and a very detailed story with multiple sources and sort of, and which has been substantiated very well. After that, the Indian Foreign Office, they termed it as malicious and anti-India propaganda, a baseless story. On the other hand, it's very interesting. Again, Jaishankar said that he was more cautious. He said that this was not India's policy to do so. But very interestingly, in a subsequent interview, the Indian Defense Minister, Rajnath Singh, he has actually accepted that India has been doing that. In fact, he has very categorically said that yes, we will target the terrorists wherever they are on foreign soils, and now we have the power to do that. And he even said that the Prime Minister Modi himself has stated that in his speeches. In fact, in a recent speech, he said that we will, I'm translating what he said, that we will invade their homes and strike there. So it is, and I think it's very interesting that we are in a situation very close to the elections. So on the one hand, while Indian officials are denying it, senior Indian officials, and the Foreign Ministry is denying it, the Defense Ministry, the Defense Minister and the Prime Minister, they are not denying it. In fact, they are saying that India is now powerful enough because they know that this can garner them more support in the elections. And so, but by like asking the Foreign Office, their Foreign Office to deny it, what they're trying to create is a plausible deniability. So that you're accepting it as well on the political level, but through sort of like slightly veiled worded statements. On the other hand, your Foreign Ministry is denying it as malicious and baseless and a propaganda. But the world knows now that India has been involved in such acts, and that India probably as a policy has started doing that. And the worst part is what the story suggests, that India used terrorist organizations to hit their targets. So while they have been saying, and even recently, Ajit Doval just, a day before, a couple of days before, in an SCO meeting in Astana, again started accusing Pakistan of state sponsor of terrorism, and said that terrorism needs to be eliminated wherever it is, in any form and manifestation. But at the same time, they are involved in supporting terrorists to carry out their operations on their behalf. So it's a very, very clear case of the pot calling the kettle black,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Absolutely. Masood Saab, I want to build further on that as well, and try and figure out the statements that are coming in from Indian side. And of course, we've seen differing statements coming in, as an ambassadors have explained. They may be actually contributing to India's benefit. But I also want to understand that when we take a look at the fact that if a country says that they're targeting terrorist hideouts or individuals that they're claiming as terrorists, are they able to get away with actually making such assassination attempts in another country? And in terms of what we've seen particularly happen in the US and Canada, it's also clear that in fact alone is also not true. As part of these operations, there have been other targeted killings that have been made, that have been linked back to RAW in India. And so how exactly will this operation then be looked at from an international perspective, and what sort of avenues then will India have to follow with regards to what happens next?
Thank you, Sona, for giving me this opportunity to talk on this important subject. First of all, let's understand India has a long history of using these false flag operations, then the so-called surgical strikes, then cross-border terrorism, and we saw then subjecting Pakistan to fifth-generation warfare, hybrid warfare, then their involvement in the espionage in Qatar recently we saw, and then they were exposed by EU lab, Stanford Internet Observatory, and then also by Washington Post of their involvement using the social media and basically targeting Pakistan. When we talk of this recent Indian involvement, then extrajudicial killings across the borders, that is known as the transnational repression. When you go outside of your country and you stalk, you assault, and you assassinate your opponents of maybe political or the religious, on basis on religious, so that is transnational repression. But India has a history again of this transnational repression. Soon after 1962 war, they established an organization which was named as Establishment 22, and this was basically raised by basically recruiting the Tibetan refugees and the Gorkhas, and the mandate was to operate behind enemy lines, that was Chinese line, to disturb their line of communication and by carrying out sabotage. And today, this Establishment 22 has been renamed as a Special Frontier Force. At present, it is deployed in Ladakh. So that was one in 1962. In 2010, then the VK Singh was the army chief, and he created the Technical Support Division. And the mandate of this Technical Support Division was for the covert operation across line of control and across while using Afghan side to carry out terrorist activities by supplying weapons and equipment to Baloch militants. So they confessed their activities. So now the transnational repression, this is the latest one, which now India has shown their ability to carry out these operations. First, we saw, as discussed, the Hardeep Singh Nijjar was assassinated in Canada, and that was established when the information was provided by the Five Eyes countries. So the Indian involvement was there. United States was on board. And subsequently, there was another assassination of Rup Doman Singh in Canada, and then Otal Singh Panda in United Kingdom. And lastly, we saw the Gurpatwant Singh Pannu, the basically man behind Six for Justice, the plot which was filed by the FBI. Again, Indian involvement. Nikhil Gupta was arrested. So they have the evidence of Indian involvement in cross-national repression. When we talk of Pakistan, yes. And in case of Pakistan, they also carried assassination of Sikhs and the Kashmiris who migrated to Pakistan in early 90s. When we talk of Sikhs in Pakistan, Paramjit Singh Panjwar was assassinated in Lahore. Then the Jahoton blast was also carried out by Ra. Then the mysterious killing of Sikhs in Peshawar, the killing of a Sikh in Quetta, in Multan, and then the recently in January, our Foreign Secretary Qazi Saab made a press conference and he gave the irrefutable evidence of Indian involvement, Indian handlers, Mukesh Kumar, Yogesh Kumar, in the assassination of one in Azad Kashmir, Riaz, and probably one was Shahil Latif in Daska Sialkot. So they were Indians were.
Right, Masood Saab, I just want a follow up with regards to. I understand that this has been something going on for a very very long, and Pakistan, of course, has been talking about this as well. But what the report also cites a Pakistani official saying is that this, especially since post 2019, this is something new and unprecedented. Would you agree with this? Is there something new and unprecedented about what's going on right now?
Yeah, exactly. In last 3 years, the 20 assassination, as Guardian has reported, and basically targeting inside Pakistan and hiring mercenaries and especially Afghan nationals. They are also involved. So this is something, a new dimension has been added to this terrorism, which India is exporting terrorism cross border into Pakistan. India has become a now epic center of terrorism, while previously using Afghanistan, now using in their own soil, and through mercenaries they are killing inside Pakistan. So we have a case now. We can go to United Nations with a fresh dossier. Earlier we have submitted 5 dossiers of Indian involvement in terrorism in Pakistan. So we can go to United Nations with fresh dossier with details. We can share this data with the Five Eyes countries, and at the same time we can take up the case for sanctions on those involved in the basically assassination of Pakistanis inside Pakistan, the raw handlers. So we have a case now.
All right. Faisal, when we take a look at all of this information, and of course the report itself is pretty comprehensive in this regard, but I want to see if there are any parallels that can be drawn with reference to what has been cited before and what has been cited within Pakistan and then externally as well. And I understand that there have been arguments with regards to the kind of targets that have been there, particularly when we talk about US or Canada. But in terms of the operation as a whole, is this not something that just links back to state involvement in other countries and can then be taken up in this way?
Yes, it definitely can. And of course, obviously, Sana, when we talk about this particular case, we have to, of course, see it in the light of India exporting terrorism. And before 2019, of course, they have been, exporting terrorism in Pakistan through people like Kulbhushan Jadhav and many more who obviously have been, activated within Pakistan, and they have been using the terror factories based in Afghanistan and elsewhere, and they have been actually utilizing them within Pakistan, and them factories were actually being used against all of the Pakistan. But this time around, since 2019, their modus operandi, it's focused on obviously people who are targeted. I mean, names were given, and them are the people that needs to be targeted. But for this one, of course, we have to look at domestically what kind of modus operandi they have been applying on Khalistan movement and or people who were very important and the voices that were actually considered as mattered when it comes to talking about Khalistan movement. Especially one very recent case is of Moosewala, Sidhu Moosewala singer, how he was murdered. He was murdered, of course, it was shown off to the world as if it was a brawl between two of the groups.
Yeah.
There was one called, of course, Lawrence Bishnoi group, and the other one, there was another group that was being considered as, that was part of it as well, and both of the gangs were fighting each other. So he belonged to one of the gangs, and that's how he got killed. ironically, one wonders where the, both of the leadership of the groups are. Both of them, they are in the jail, and they are being facilitated by RAW itself, and they are being facilitated in the best of the manners. So what they are trying to do is, they have the people inside, the group heads, and they are dictating them that these are the people we want to eliminate. First, they want to, they just go out to, sort of malign that person, that he belongs to Lawrence Bishnoi, and their opposite has actually killed them. So domestically, this is what the modus operandi they have been, applying. But when it comes to, internationally, since 2019, if we go through what kind of, activities their consulates, especially not the High Commission, but consulates were involved. Birmingham, of course, everyone knows that it is, a hub of Khalistan movement when it comes to Khalistanis. They are in a large number in Birmingham. At the same time, what they have started doing is, there is a place called Leicester where Hindus from Indian side, Indian ethnicity, they are in a larger number. So now they have turned it into a communal violence kind of thing. Why? Because what they're trying to do is, they are exporting the hardliner Hindutva ideology to Britain and places like Leicester and all of the places where their Hindus are predominantly in large numbers. And we have been seeing the footages as well. They were going on the streets and chanting Jai Shri Ram, and they were chanting slogans against Khalistan movement and Muslims as well at the same time. So they have been targeting Gujarati Muslims, Patels, and they were targeting the Khalistani Sikh who are actually settled in Britain. So in Birmingham, what they're trying to portray is that there is a communal violence, and if something happens, if a Khalistani is murdered, then it should be put on that community, not on a state itself, that India is behind it. No, they would portray it as if two communities are fighting each other. Same is being applied in Canada. So this was going on until they actually figured out that in New York, the New York case is particular case. Why? Because FBI, what FBI did, that they actually hired a hitman, and he got penetrated into raw activities, and raw itself, the same very person who was portraying as an hitman, they actually doing a deal with them, and that's how they got caught in New York. And that's how their previous incidents were taken up as well. So now it is in front of everyone. The whole world knows what kind of activities they were involved in, and they just wanted to portray it as if it was communal violence, though in the Western world, whatever is happening, they are the ones who are staging. Same kind of same kind of cases and footages you can actually see taking place in Australia as well. So it is a huge menace which they have created. RAW has created a huge menace for the Five Eyes, and now Five Eyes are actually probing all of the murders which has taken place, because every murder would be actually pointing the fingers towards the New Delhi, and everyone knows that RAW is behind it. And same is happening in Pakistan. They are cherry picking the names, and they are employing terrorists obviously sitting in Afghanistan, and them terrorists are making sure that their targets are met, and that's how they get paid. So they are exporting terrorism, and right now this is what we need to highlight, that India is the biggest exporter of terrorism when it comes to in modern day terrorism.
Right, and I feel that as people in Pakistan, or as a country, we've of course established that and have been part of this dance for quite some time now. But Ambassador, what I want to understand is whether this is also something that countries like the US and Canada will agree or are already in agreement with, especially when we talk about the huge amounts of evidence that has already been shared and that continues to come out. And in light of, in the same vein, will this story in itself create any ruckus for it to really matter? Because we've seen evidence that has been linked with incidents in Canada and the US. We've seen incidents in the past as well being brought out, and very credible evidence being given as well. But despite that, there hasn't really been an impact for it to really count for India?
Yeah, let's see different aspects of it. One is that after a long time, Canada, countries like Canada, US, and the UK, they had criticized India. They had taken up this issue with India, and it actually came up in the top level contacts between those countries. That's one thing. The second aspect is that India is a big economy. It's a great power, an emerging great power, and it has a very important placement in the US Indo-Pacific strategy. It is a member of the Quad, I2U2, and the other organizations like AUKUS and Five Eyes. They also count on India, even if it's not part of some of those organizations. So because it's a very important part of their strategy for containment of China, so then India gets a certain leeway, and also gets a certain leeway because of its economic potential. Now this economic potential, it has now $650 billion worth of foreign reserves. It has a huge trade, it's over $600 billion of exports, and the potential in the coming years, because it's growing at a rate of 8%, the GDP growth rate, which is the highest in the world right now of any major economy in the world, and that has been consistent for many years. So all these factors give India, the lead to India having an allowance from the West in general. And that is why, despite the fact that for many, many years now, there has been clear evidence that India has been involved, while it clamors about state-sponsored or cross-border terrorism, but it has been involved in the cross-border terrorism itself. And for instance, in this saga, which has now been the story, post the story of Guardian, what we see is not just the fact that India used mercenaries or they used terrorists for those targeted killings, or they carried out those operations on foreign soils, but also the fact that they involved third countries. For instance, the story suggests that many of these operations were basically planned and executed from Dubai or UAE or Mauritius or Nepal. So it is so unfortunate that it is using friendly countries who were unaware of what Indians were doing in their territory, planning all these operations, which are basically terrorist operations, which are illegal by any standards or by the international law. So this is the unfortunate reality. But I believe that as more and more evidence comes out, then there'll be greater pressure on India to deviate from this policy, because for now it seems a consistent, clearly planned and a well thought out policy, which emerges from what people call the Ajit Doval doctrine. So it's that doctrine of offensive defense, or basically, in his words, tit for tat, or addressing terrorism with terrorism. That is their version of it. But the fact is that this is a continuation of that doctrine and an expansion of that doctrine in another area. And some inspiration has been taken, as the story suggests, by the fact that other intelligence agencies in the world in the past, for instance, Mossad, had carried out certain operations like that, and perhaps other intelligence agencies as well. And India felt that if those countries could get away with it, now that we have, and this is very interesting, because the Indian Prime Minister and the Defense Minister has very clearly, between the lines, made it clear that we now have the power to conduct such operations, and the world will tolerate that. That's what they're saying between the lines. So now I think there is a need for Pakistan, and not just for Pakistan, for the Western countries as well, because if they don't stop India, if they don't put a lot of pressure on India, then this policy will not only continue in the coming years, but it could expand even. And that is not what the world needs right now.
Absolutely. Masood Saab, there's also, of course, concerns of when we talk about this, the details of how this operation is being carried out with regards to a lot of money transfer that had been going on with a lot of millions of payments that have been cited as per the report as well, that have been given to certain individuals, and in most cases, individuals who seem to be in need of the money or who had been perhaps lured into it, including those linked to terrorist organizations that have been given sort of the guise of indulging in a sort of sacred killing. So I want to understand when we talk about the kind of factors that center around financial aspects of terrorism and money flows. There is also, of course, a lot of concern with regards to the FATF as well, and the way that different organizations and world bodies are looking at these channels. Is this not something that's showing up in terms of what is being looked at? And if not, then why not?
Exactly. And India is a classic case of to be on the radar of FATF. And previously there were reports that there were 44 banks. They were involved in the suspicious money transfer of on the behalf of Indians. So there were suspicious money laundering issues. But in this particular case, when we talk of these hired mercenaries from especially they were basically hired from the United Arab Emirates, basically mostly from the locals, and in some cases the Afghans they were hired. And according to the Guardian, they have carried the details of modus operandi and the payments and financial payments which were made. And our foreign secretary also gave the details of the money trail, which was payments were made to these individuals. And subsequently, and if we look at these details, they have given the Guardian, they have given the details of WhatsApp messages, the financial records, and as well as the, the arrest records. So which substantiates the involvement of these individuals on behalf of RA. But at the same time, there's another important thing which I would like to highlight, as Johar Saab was explaining, that the Five Eyes countries, they're on board and they know what is exactly happening. Jake Sullivan, who visited India exactly probably in the June end after the Modi's visit to United States, and he is on record. He said, regardless of the country, we are going to defend our principles. That was one thing. But at the same time, we look from the Indian side, the Shashi Tharoor, the former member of Lok Sabha, an intellectual, he said with the joyness, and he said, why don't the world accept us as the members of the countries like operation carried out by Mossad and the KGB, and also he referred one of the Middle Eastern country. So they are basically they are confessing and accepting their involvement in the carrying out these assassination. At the same time, when this assassination was carried out in Pakistan, and the accounts associated with the RAW, basically they disclosed, they carried the story within 30 minutes, and they said it was retribution. Basically, what exactly they deserved to be eliminated. So that is how things are going on, and the evidence is there, and certainly Five Eyes, they're on board. Pakistan has the evidence. So this is a time now we can prepare a case and weigh a dossier, and subsequently we can also highlight these financial transactions as you highlighted, and from where the money came, and the countries which were used for the planning, like.
Masood Saab, we've already given dossiers in the past.
Yes, exactly. You said we gave 5 dossiers. First was in 2009 and last was in 2022. But unfortunately, as explained by Johar Saab, that in the international community, basically you see the interests of the nations that matters. For Americans and the other European countries, basically India is the counterweight politically as well as economically against China. So maybe at times they are ignoring, but when we but the way Biden refused to attend Republic Day, then we think there is at least they still understand the justice or fairness when we talk of these terrorist activities. So it is still, there's an option. We can still can prepare a case. We can go and highlight, because the Canadians, the Americans, they are on board, and we can go to United Nations. We can go to the International Court of Justice. And if you recall, basically, probably it was in 2022, we basically give names of 4 Indians involved in terrorism based on the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1267. There's 4 individuals to be declared terrorists, and one of them was Patnaik, who was involved in the master. He was the basically mastermind of the Mastung carnage, where Sarai Vaisani was martyred. And then there was another Angora who was in Jalalabad. He was in contact with the APS mastermind. So we have the evidence, and our former national security advisor, he was on record, who said we have the evidence of these individuals involved in the terrorism inside Pakistan. So we can still plead our case. We can go to the international, the important embassies inside in Pakistan as well as across Europe to to highlight our case and the Indian involvement in terrorism.
Masood Saab, aren't these all tried and tested measures? Are there avenues that we haven't explored?
Yeah, exactly. But still, I think there is an option or the opportunity to highlight our basically our concern. The things will not stop here if no action is not taken. They will continue. Maybe after 6 months, after a year, they will continue the way. Basically, they are still using the proxies in Afghanistan, as Raja Saab was highlighting that in the recent the SCO conference. Ajit Doval made a statement which was, he never mentioned of TTP or BLA, BLF. He talked of other the proxies in Afghanistan. So that is the double standards the Indians they are showing. Basically they didn't never he talk of the proxies which are working for India. So that is the double standard of India, and they basically, that's why India has become a fascist regime,
Right.
and Modi has become a dictator, and we see the plight of the Muslims inside India, and that is pathetic. I must say.
Right. Thank you very much, Masood Ahmed Saab, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. Faisal, Afghanistan is an important factor that I also want to explore. And of course, most recently also, we're dealing with counterterrorism activities. And we've also reiterated once again that there is, of course, zero tolerance policy, and we need the Afghan Taliban to make sure that they're fulfilling their commitments. And we've seen that this is something that we've also proven in action to Afghanistan is something that we will absolutely not tolerate. But I want to understand then, given the kind of involvement that we've seen previously as well and talked about of Indian elements, and then of course with regards to the assassinators being hired for certain purposes and of course targeting members of terrorist organizations, how does this play into what we're expecting from Afghanistan, and then of course what their stances and their involvement with organizations and other elements has been so far?
Yes, and obviously when we talk about Afghanistan, one thing which is not being understood by the current regime, of course the Taliban regime, is that there was something called NDS in past, and right after Afghan Taliban took power in Kabul, there was obviously, we remember we did the program as well related to it, that there is a place called Lajpat Nagar in Delhi, where thousands of families were settled by the Indians themselves, and they were Afghans. And of course, them Afghans, they were majority of them, they were actually associated with NDS, and they were the ones who were doing India's dirty work on ground. And of course, whatever was happening during that time in Pakistan, NDS was as maligned as India itself was. So they still had the ground forces, they still had the moles on the ground which could be used by NDS. And of course, NDS sitting in New Delhi is more closer to RAW itself, and RAW has been using them out there in India. And as they say, once a spook is always a spook. So all of these NDS spooks, when they are already settled in New Delhi, they will be going out of their ways to do things that are actually affecting Pakistan, and having their moles on ground in Afghanistan, it would be quite easier for them to, of course, conduct more and more activities. That is what India has been doing, and same goes out, as earlier Brigadier Masood rightly pointed out, that Indians are actually taking help of Afghan citizens who are settled in Dubai, in UAE, and that's from where they are actually facilitating and of course paying the amounts to people sitting in Afghanistan, and hawala or hundi is being used by India itself. RAW is using that, and all of these old NDS spooks, they are still employed, but this time around their immediate employer is of course RAW. And don't forget, when NDS originally started working, it was trained by RAW itself. So RAW trained the NDS, and them NDS of course spooks, they have been working against Pakistan while Ghani's regime was there, or even before that as well. So this all has been happening. Of course, Amrullah Saleh was the head of NDS at that time, and it has been taking place in Pakistan, and all of them NDS people are still being used. Now here, Taliban sitting in Kabul, they need to understand this, that on ground, them NDS people, they are still having their spooks, and they are still working against Pakistan. They are still working against all of the neighboring countries. But of course, this time around, if the other countries and Pakistan would be looking towards Kabul, then it's Taliban that has to be responsible for it, because they are the ones who are sole administrative power in Afghanistan right now. So all of these TTP, BLA, BLF, IMU, ETIM, and ISIS Khorasan, all of these people, of course, they are intact with the old NDS, and NDS is still facilitating. And who's the godfather behind them? It's RAW, and RAW is still doing all of these activities, and that is why we keep on highlighting this aspect, and we keep on highlighting in front of Afghan Taliban as well, that these are the things that needs to be understood by them, because eventually, if a problem is created, of course, Pakistan would go all the way to, of course, secure and safeguard its citizens. So, if Pakistan will do some activities against these, then Taliban would certainly say that they were asleep before, and now they are waking up, and this is what under their nose was taking place.
Right. Ambassador Sahab, last question. We of course see that the BJP and Prime Minister Modi will be most likely elected for another term, and so we've seen these activities increase during his tenure, and so do we foresee more activities happening within Pakistan, irrespective of the kind of evidence that we've seen before? Because it seems that while, of course, this has been talked about at certain higher platforms, it seems that this is a continuing story. And under the BJP, will the situation be increased?
Yeah, that is the concern that we have, and it's a very sad situation, because look at this region. It's 1/4 of the world population, South Asia. And it's far, far behind the world standards in so many things. But there is a huge potential, such young populations, and so much human development is possible, so much economic development on the whole is possible.
Yeah.
But this is what has been the biggest stumbling block. And that is, India being the bigger country in the region, it should have behaved in a more responsible manner. And I think it's still important, and it's incumbent upon India, because Prime Minister Modi always talks about economics. He has been termed as the economic messiah of India, because it's since the last 10 years that he has been in power that India has outperformed its economic record in the past. They call it economic miracle, what they're witnessing in India now. But unfortunately, while India has been growing economically, it has been also involved, as very detailed elaboration has been given by both our analysts.
Yeah.
And this is unfortunate, because this would eventually create conditions. If you do these things in other countries, and if you support the terrorist organization there involved in separatism or whatever activities, then those terrorist organizations can always turn around, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And it has happened. As they say, the chicken can come home to roost. Like in Afghanistan, we've seen that over and over again. And in the world history, we have seen so many examples. So whenever you support such acts, whenever you use state terrorism
Right.
as a tool of your foreign policy, as a tool of your hegemonic ambitions, then unfortunately it can come back to haunt you at some point. And that is why now Modi, he is very likely to be re-elected. So it is our hope that once he is re-elected, because just before the elections, they always do that, and the intensity of these activities go up, and the rhetoric goes up as well. But it is our sincere hope that after the elections, the call for dialogue, a peaceful dialogue between India and Pakistan, which Pakistan has been suggesting, the Indians pay heed to that, and a peaceful dialogue is instituted between the two countries. Indians always talk about, okay, if you have to talk to us, talk about 3 T's.
Yeah.
And those 3 T's are terrorism, trade, and transit trade. But the fact is, if you have to talk about terrorism, yes, we are willing to talk about terrorism, because we are the ones who are actually suffering from it, the terrorism emanating from cross borders, whether it's from Afghanistan or whether it's from India. So yes, but the other things as well,
Right.
the disputes that we need to resolve as well, the possibilities for better relations, the possibilities for economic cooperation.
Absolutely.
Then it has to be a holistic dialogue. And I think India, I hope, this is my hope, that once Modi wins the election, then better sense would prevail, sanity would prevail, and then they would come up with a better strategy than this. Because this strategy, it could have some short-term benefits for them, but in the longer term, it would not be benign for them as well.
Absolutely, and this is of course the hope that we all have. Thank you so much, Ambassador Sab, for being part of the discussion, and thank you, Faisal, for always being part of the debate. That's all that we have from the show now. We'll see you on Monday.